The Philadelphia 76ers fell 123 to 115 on Friday night against the New Orleans Pelicans, and what I'm just deeming an inexcusable loss. Joel Embiid once again not in the lineup with this new foot injury, but I don't care. You do not lose on your home floor to one of, if not the worst team in the NBA in the New Orleans Pelicans. Going into the game, the Pelicans were sitting at 7-31, and even without Joel Embiid, the Sixers were still a favorite. When you have two max contract players in a Paul George and a Tyrese Maxey, you go out there and you win that basketball game. That effort last night was flat out inexcusable, and the Sixers season from hell continues to get worse. And I think I've looked at this from like a glass half full perspective. Basically, just like the goal is to get to the playoffs and get Joel Embiid a healthy playoff run, and still that is the end goal. But we're starting to flirt with the serious reality of not making it. And when you have efforts like last night and you're losing games to a bad team in the Pelicans and you're squeaking by the other night, almost blowing a game to the Washington Wizards, it starts to become not just a fantasy, but more of a reality that there is a legit chance that this team does not find their way into the playoffs. And we'll see what happens with Joel. Obviously, it is a different circumstance when he's on the floor. But that effort last night was just inexcusable, and that always starts at the top. Your NBA players, obviously, you can't just roll out the ball because everyone's talented. Your head coach has to have those guys ready and motivated to go. And I know at the end of the day, too, these are professional players. These are guys making millions of dollars. You should be self motivated to go out there and earn your paycheck, earn your contract. But it also starts with a motivation factor from Nick Nurse as well, and just being ready, having your guys ready to go. They should have lost a game to the Wizards on Wednesday night. They should have blown that lead. They found a way to win it and squeak by. But last night against the Pelicans, at home, no Zion Williamson, who is out because he missed the team flight. That's the situation that the freaking Pelicans are in. And the Sixers still sit there and just lay an egg, roll out a dud. Falling 123-115, playing terrible defense. And it's a game that, like, if you looked at the box score, you'd be like, oh, like, Paul George had a nice night. Tyrese Maxey had a nice night. No, that was a game that if you actually sat there, tuned in, watched the basketball game, the effort was despicable, and it was a disgusting overall performance from that Sixers team last night. And for Paul George to come out after the game and say what he said, basically, all right, we're still not panicking. His quote is, yeah, definitely is not panic mode, but there's sort of a desperation that we need to start playing with and look at every game like it matters. And okay, you can look at it from kind of two perspectives in this regard. You can look at it from it's good someone's finally stepped up and said it because that's something that we've talked about on the show multiple times now. They're sitting here at 14-21, and you're continuing to try and dig yourself out of the hole that you dug yourself into and just battle back to 500, find a way into at least the playoff play-in spot. But the Philadelphia 76ers continue to just overlook these type of games, overlook these type of spots. These are must-win games if you want to be a playoff team. And as I said at the beginning, you can look at it where it's like, okay, good thing he stepped up and said this. Maybe this is a message to the team. But the fact that that's even going through his head, Paul George's head, who knows what's going through the rest of the locker room? Like, they're just like, oh, it's a Pelicans home game Friday night. We can just roll out the ball and we'll win. Like, no, these are NBA players as well. These are guys trying to make a name for themselves, earn contracts themselves. Those guys are on these bottom tier teams. They usually play harder because they're less talented than like a roster like the Sixers. Like, for them to still have Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, Kelly Oubre has been playing his ass off. He's excused from all this, but Caleb Martin, the list goes on and on. Yabusele has been playing awesome too. But still have a competent enough roster to go out and beat a team that came into the game at 7-31. You need to still show up and play hard and play with some effort. And for Paul George to say it's like, all right, we have to look at every game like it matters. You're 36 games in now. It's not the honeymoon phase. It's not the, oh, all right, once everyone's healthy, blah, blah, blah. No, let's call a spade here. The effort last night was terrible. It is inexcusable to show up and play like that. But also, this team is never going to fully be healthy. Maybe in stretches, 3 to 4 games at a time. Something always seems to come up in the road, and it's not a guarantee, it's not a fact. But if we can look at history, we can look at perspective. This is a roster with older guys, getting older, injured players, but also the Sixers' track record in injury history is just insane. You look at everything that Embiid's gone through, whatever happened to Ben Simmons, Paul George, and his injuries to start the year. He's dealt with knees, he's dealt with groins, Tyrese Maxey at the beginning of the year, hamstring. Like, for the Sixers to even this be a thought in their mind, like, okay, now we got to start locking in and playing well. Like, obviously, it's still early. It's still a lot of time to the potential of this team finding their way to the playoffs. but you have to show up and play every single night, and that starts with the message from your head coach as well. It was just sickening to even see him say that, consider that, and maybe it's a thing that gets through to the team. Like, all right, guys, like playtime's over. We have to lock in, and we have to win these games that we need to win, like against favorites. Like you're gonna drop games to the Celtics, you're gonna drop games to the Cavs, you're gonna drop games that they did last week to the Warriors. But you have to beat these bad teams if you want to dig yourself out of the hole that you got yourself into. And it seems like they're just still going through the motions. It's it was also infuriating to see this last night. Can't play the video for you, but basically in his press conference, he said, "I'm bored." And I mean, what? You're a max contract player. How does that even go through your head to say that? Like, especially in a market like Philadelphia, like, I'm bored. Are we serious? Like, for lack of a better term, that's what we're going with. Like, what? This is why you were brought in. You're almost as bad as freaking Tobias Harris right now, like with the max contract. Like you have not lived up to the hype at all, Paul George. You have no room to be like, oh, I'm averaging 28 and 8 and 7 and we're still losing. Like, no, you are one of the main causes of this problem, of this issue right now, and where the Sixers are sitting at 14 and 21. Sure, injuries have played a part, but Paul George, you're looking cooked, brother. It's as simple as that. Like, are you really looking like as major of a difference maker, as a positive addition than what Tobias Harris was? Like, sure, you're rebounding well, sure, you're defending well, but you're not playing well from a scoring perspective, and that's what you were brought into. As Sean always says, you were brought in, to raise the floor of this team. In games that they don't have Joel Embiid, you're expected to go out there and carry the torch. And we can look at the box score last night. As I said at the beginning, like the box score, you look at it and you see, all right, Paul George, 25 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals. You look at Tyrese Maxey, 30, 12, and 6. Like, Maxey, I think, is a little bit more excused, but still, his shooting has been up and down and inconsistent. But if you watch that game last night, the Sixers really only made it interesting and was kind of stat padding it a little bit. It seemed like in that fourth quarter, like Paul George showed a little bit of sense of urgency in the fourth quarter and was attacking the rim, was hitting a couple threes. But if you sat there and watched that game, you know that's not a legit box score. That is not the performance that Paul George turned out. The first half was inexcusable, and for him to even just come out there and utter the words, "I'm bored," basically. Like, what are we doing? This just keeps getting crazier, and the dumpster fire that is the 2024-2025 Philadelphia 76ers rolls on. Will Joel Embiid return soon? We hope so. It's obviously a different team when he's in the lineup. You're missing kind of your identity with him out of the lineup, but Kelly Oubre, continue to give props and flowers to him. He's been awesome. He's been playing his tail off, and really the only guy that seems to care. Like, as I was saying at the beginning, like the effort perspective is the biggest thing. But Kelly Oubre last night, 21 and 7. He has been playing so hard in his tail off, and he seems to be the only guy that really cares. He's a player that is playing for a bigger contract, and I don't think the Sixers are going to be able to retain him because of the way that he's been playing. That's a story for a whole nother day. But he's the only guy that it seemed like, all right, you can look at Tyrese Maxey's stats and say maybe him as well, Yabu too, but like it starts and ends with Paul George for this video and for this game at least. Like, that is just inexcusable, and I feel like I've used that word 100 times, but that is the case for this Sixers team right now and the way that they're playing. Lifeless, and you also have to point fingers at the top to Nick Nurse. But in a game that you look at the box score and you're like, oh, we got 25 and 10 from Paul George. We got 21 and 7 from Kelly Oubre. We got 30 and 12 from Tyrese Maxey. We got Ricky Council even played pretty well last night, 13 points. He was playing hard. Another guy that always plays hard for the Sixers. That's a box where you look at it and think we win. But then you turn around, you give up 123 points, and you don't really turn it on until late in the fourth quarter and try and make a run at it. CJ McCollum has one of his best games of the season, turning back the clock. Like, it's a game that box score scouting does nothing for you. You turn it on and you saw that the effort wasn't there. And is the Sixers team checked out? How really motivated are they? The questions are beginning to spiral more and more. And I've tried to look at this from a positive perspective. Like, let's get everyone healthy. Let's not panic. We're still have half the season to go. But we're 36 games in now, fellas. There's no more time for putzing around. It's go time. And maybe what Paul George said at the podium last night gets through to the team, and they start to buy in more, and they take these games against these inferior opponents more seriously. But the Sixers season isn't going to change until that happens. And I love this quote, but nothing changes without changes. And there needs to be some major changes mentality-wise in that Sixers locker room. Let's see if they're able to bounce back in their next game. But for now, the Sixers season continues in the downward spiral that we've seen. Hopefully, they're able to turn it around. Hopefully, Joel Embiid's able to come back. But as always, we'll have you covered with everything here on Sixers Digest.